During the Cold War, the whole world was tiptoeing across a tightrope, at the bottom of which was nuclear annihilation. Tensions were very high and countries had to let everyone know that they would not be pushed around, but not so much that another country would be tempted to push the big red button. The world was so tense that even the tiniest, most seemingly inconsequential thing could start a domino effect that would result in billions of deaths around the world. And we are going to talk about one of these minor things in this video. This is how World War III almost started over a tree. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get into the mad lad, a big thank you to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video. If you are like me, you are very pro-internet freedom and very anti-censorship, and you don't want big corpo and big government watching everything you are doing online or to know that weird thing you're into. Or simply something more useful, like protecting your data and identity. Well, with Private Internet Access, you can do all of that. Private Internet Access is the world's leading, most transparent, no-logging VPN provider with over 30 million downloads and 10 plus years of service experience. The software is 100% open source, has servers in 78 countries, and is easy to use, but also highly customizable to your needs. You can also watch all of your favourite content from streaming services around the world, such as Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus, by unblocking them at the click of a button. I use it to access the American Netflix because it has a better variety than what we get here in the UK. But if for some reason you wanted to access the UK Netflix or the BBC as an American, you can do that too. PIA is available on a wide range of devices and for most operating systems such as Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS and Android, and can be installed on up to 10 devices at the same time. There are multiple payment options including PayPal and Bitcoin, and most importantly, it does not log your data at all. So use my link down below to get PIA VPN for less than $3 a month with 2 months extra for free. That means it's 83% off at only $2.08 a month to enjoy 100% anonymity online. Click the link. The DMZ, or the Demilitarized Zone, between North and South Korea is one of the most highly guarded and keenly observed pieces of land in the world. For those of you who don't know anything about that, first of all, go outside and touch grass. Second of all, in the aftermath of the Korean War, a buffer zone was created between North Korea and South Korea. The zone stretches 2,000 metres to both sides of the military demarcation line, which is the official border between North and South Korea. And troops inside the DMZ are limited in the number of weapons they can carry and the size of their patrols. Troops from both sides of North and South may patrol the DMZ, but they may not cross the military demarcation line, which runs through the centre of the DMZ. There is one area where the troops can, and often do, meet face to face. The Joint Security Area, or the JSA, in Panmunjom. The JSA is a site administered by the United Nations Command. It was set up initially as an area where negotiations such as prisoner transfers could take place, as it would be neutral ground. Prisoners brought to the JSA to be sent back to their own country were given a choice on whether they wanted to return to their home country or remain part of the country that imprisoned them. And they had to make that final decision at their transfer across a bridge that cuts across the military demarcation line. Thus, the bridge earned its infamous title, the Bridge of No Return. Now, the DMZ and especially the JSA were meant to be areas that encouraged peace, but long-standing feuds are hard to forget, and incidents have occurred. And perhaps the most infamous one took place on the 18th of August, 1976. In the JSA, near the bridge, there was a 100-foot tall poplar tree that blocked the view between UNC Checkpoint 3 and UNC Observation Post 5. UNC forces thought that this was too much of a risk, as the tree could hide North Korean movements around the checkpoint. So, they sent a detachment of troops to go in and chop down the tree. The troops sent in were the American Captain Arthur Boniface, his Korean counterpart Captain Kim, American First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, 11 enlisted personnel who were both Korean and American, and 5 members of the Korean Service Corps. The captains Boniface and Kim did not carry firearms, as only 5 armed officers were allowed in the JSA at any one time from any one side. The Korean Service Corps did bring axes with them, but these axes were obviously to chop down the tree. After the UNC and South Korean forces began to chop the tree down, 15 North Korean soldiers appeared. However, they were just observing and watching the soldiers cut down the tree. The commander of the North Korean soldiers watching the tree was Senior Lieutenant Pak Chul, who had earned the nickname Lieutenant Bulldog from the UNC soldiers, as he had a history of aggressive confrontations. After about 15 minutes of watching the soldiers work on the tree, the Bulldog abruptly told the workers to stop chopping the tree down, as the tree was apparently planted by the great Kim Il-sung himself. Was it I? Confrontations with North Korean troops goading and aggravating UNC troops were not uncommon, and the common practice was just to ignore them. So, Captain Boniface gritted his teeth, turned his back on the Bulldog, and ordered the soldiers to keep working on chopping down the tree. After being ignored, the Bulldog sent a runner over the Bridge of No Return, and within minutes, a truck full of North Korean guards crossed back over the bridge. 20 troops got out of the truck armed with clubs and crowbars. Reinforced, the Bulldog reiterated his demand that the little UNC landscaping project was to be stopped immediately. Boniface again turned his back to the North Koreans and continued cutting down the tree. In response to this, the Bulldog carefully removed his watch, wrapped it in a handkerchief, placed it in his pocket, and shouted the words that almost started World War III. Kill the bastards. The North Korean soldiers picked up the axes dropped by the UNC troops chopping down the tree and began to attack the UNC guards, wounding all but one of them. The Bulldog knocked Captain Boniface to the ground, and then at least 5 North Korean soldiers bludgeoned him to death with clubs, crowbars and axes. Lieutenant Barrett jumped over a low wall that led past a 4.5 metre deep depression across the road from the poplar tree. This depression wasn't visible from the road due to it being filled with small trees and other vegetation. Eventually, UNC forces managed to disperse the North Korean soldiers and recover the body of Captain Boniface. They loaded the body onto a truck and drove it back to the South Korean side. The entire fight only lasted 20 to 30 seconds, and the entire incident was recorded from UN Outpost number 5. After the fight, the UNC forces noticed strange activity at KPA-8, a North Korean outpost near the depression. A North Korean would take an axe down into the depression and then emerge a few minutes later and hand the axe to another soldier. And the cycle would continue for around 90 minutes. At which point, the guards at UNC Outpost Number 5, who were observing the behaviour, were informed that Lieutenant Barrett was missing. The UNC soldiers informed their superiors of the strange activity, and a search and rescue squad was quickly sent down into the depression, where they found a severely wounded Lieutenant Barrett. It turns out that the North Koreans had been taking turns to go down into the depression to hack at Lieutenant Barrett with the axe. Lieutenant Barrett amazingly was still alive when he was found, and he was loaded onto a truck to be taken to a hospital in Seoul for emergency treatment. However, sadly, he died of his wounds while in transit. Shortly after the fight, North Korean media began to report in its characteristically unbiased way their version of what happened. The statement of what happened reads, "Around 10:45 a.m. today, the American imperialist aggressors sent in 14 hoodlums with axes into the joint security area to cut the trees on their own accord, although such work should have been mutually consented beforehand. 4 persons from our side went to the spot to warn them not to continue the work without our consent. Against our persuasion, they attacked our guards en masse and committed a serious provocative act of beating our men, wielding murderous weapons and depending on the fact that they outnumbered us. Our guards could not but resort to self-defense measures under the circumstances of this reckless provocation." Kim Jong-il, son of Kim Il-sung and future dictator of North Korea, addressed the Conference of Non-Aligned Nations in Sri Lanka within 4 hours of the fight at the poplar tree. He read a prepared document describing the fight as an unprovoked attack on North Korean troops and called for the withdrawal of UNC troops from Korea as well as the dissolution of the UNC. The resolution passed, but obviously went absolutely nowhere and was not recognised, as the UNC is still here today. If it was that easy to get rid of the UN, we would have done it already. The United States government was absolutely furious that 2 of their men had been killed trying to do something as simple as cut down a tree. The readiness level for American troops in South Korea was immediately raised to DEFCON 3, and artillery attacks were considered but eventually discounted due to an unfavourable 4-to-1 ratio of artillery pieces. Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State, urged President Gerald Ford to green-light an attack on the North Korean barracks in order to capture the killers. But Ford turned him down, as neither he nor South Korean President Park Chung-hee wanted to do anything that would cause a further escalation. The US and South Korean commands both eventually came to the conclusion that what they needed was a massive show of force, but not so much that it would escalate into a full conflict. They were going to cut down the tree with the support of an overwhelming number of troops, vehicles, and air support. You know that old saying about bringing a knife to a gunfight? Well, these guys were about to bring a tank to a fist fight. General Richard G. Stilwell and his staff at the UNC headquarters in Seoul planned over 2 days with parameters set in the White House. And on August 21st, the UNC forces commenced the largest military operation to cut down trees since Saruman the White cut down the woods of Isengard. And what did they call this tree-cutting mission? Operation Paul Bunyan. At 7 a.m, a convoy of 23 American and South Korean vehicles named Task Force Vieira drove into the JSA, catching the North Koreans completely off guard as they had only one observation post manned at that hour. The convoy consisted of 2 8-man divisions of military engineers equipped with chainsaws to cut down the tree. The engineers were accompanied by 2 30-man security platoons armed with pistols and axe handles. One platoon secured the bridge of no return, and the second platoon secured an area to the south. These platoons were accompanied by a 64-man task force of South Korean Special Forces. All of them were armed with clubs and were experts in Taekwondo in order to ensure victory in a close quarters encounter. And just to be safe, several of the Special Forces had strapped claymore mines to their chests and taunted the North Koreans to, and I quote, "fucking mon then." At the same time, UNC forces activated the detonation systems on Freedom Bridge, a way out of the JSA into South Korean territory. And they had the main gun of an M728 combat engineer vehicle pointed at the middle of the bridge so they could ensure the destruction of the bridge should that be necessary, while a different company built rafts as an alternate escape route up the Imjin River. So, a fairly strong showing of the army on land, but how was the air support? Well, the US sent 20 utility helicopters and 7 Cobra attack helicopters to circle behind their land troops. And they also sent in a B-52 Stratofortress behind the helicopters, escorted by F-4 Phantom IIs. South Korean F-5 and F-86 fighters were also seen circling overhead at high altitude. Additional planes were deployed and headed towards the area from bases in South Korea, the Philippines, and Japan. And also, the aircraft carrier USS Midway was stationed just offshore. Near the edges of the DMZ, many more infantry units, artillery units, and armour units were waiting to rush in if things went badly. Bases near the DMZ were prepared for demolition, and nuclear-capable bombers were circling over the JSA. 12,000 troops were ordered from overseas to head to South Korea, including 1,800 Marines who were stationed in Okinawa. All of this, just to cut down a fucking tree. The goal of Operation Paul Bunyan was to make a show of force so great that North Korea wouldn't even think of interfering. And having pretty much the entire army, plus bombers and jets, plus a whole fucking aircraft carrier just offshore, probably sent the message. Altogether, Task Force Vieira itself contained 813 men, 27 helicopters, and 1 armoured vehicle. But they were backed up by almost the entire military might of the United States in Asia. So, with that much backup, the engineers proceeded to start cutting down the tree while standing on top of their truck. So, what did the North Koreans respond with? A few buses with 150 to 200 troops armed with assault rifles and a few machine guns. The North Koreans arrived and observed from inside their buses quietly until a radio signal was sent to the US air support and the helicopters and planes appeared over the horizon. The North Koreans then got out of the buses and set up 2 machine gun positions, but all they did was watch in silence as the tree was taken down in 42 minutes. 3 minutes faster than predicted. 5 minutes into the operation, the UNC sent a communication to the North Koreans saying that they had entered the JSA to peacefully finish the work left unfinished. This attempt at intimidation worked, as communications intercepted from the North Koreans say that this show of force, and I quote, blew their fucking minds. I am not making that up. That was the actual words used. During the felling, 2 North Korean roadblocks were removed and 2 North Korean guard posts were vandalised by the South Korean military. A 20-foot stump of the poplar tree was deliberately left standing, sticking up like a giant middle finger saying "fuck you" to the North Koreans. The operation was completed without incident, save for a few potshots taken by the North Koreans at a US military helicopter. The UNC had demanded that the North Koreans punish those involved, and they also demanded reparations for the families of the men killed at the initial tree felling incident. Later on the same day of Operation Paul Bunyan, Kim Il-sung released a statement expressing his regret, which reads as follows. It was a good thing that no big incident occurred at Panmunjom for a long period. However, it is regretful that an incident occurred in the Joint Security Area, Panmunjom, this time. An effort must be made so that such incidents may not recur in the future. For this purpose, both sides should make efforts. We urge your side to prevent the provocation. Our side will never provoke first, but take self-defensive measures only when provocation occurs. This is our consistent stand. It is a complete non-apology, but that's the best you're going to get from North Korea. The advanced camp of the JSA was renamed from Camp Kitty Hawk to Camp Boniface to honour the fallen captain Arthur Boniface, and a building that housed the North Mission Platoon was named the Barrett Readiness Facility in honour of the fallen Lieutenant Mark Barrett. A few mementos of the incidents were taken by both sides. The North Koreans took an axe and axe handle that were used in the incident and displayed them in the North Korea Peace Museum. Alright then. General William J. Livesey, who commanded the 8th US Army in South Korea, carried a swagger stick carved from wood collected from the famous poplar tree. This entire incident occurred during the Cold War, when tensions between America and Russia were at an all-time high, and China was also in the mix as well. So, any incident occurring in the DMZ between the South Koreans, who were backed by America and the rest of the West, and the North Koreans, who were backed by Russia and China, could have kicked off yet another proxy war in the region. Except this time, the proxy war could very easily have turned into outright conflict between the world's largest superpowers, during the age where nuclear weapons were being waved around like pricks in a locker room. The DMZ was a complete powder keg that day. All it would have taken is for just one soldier to pull his trigger when he wasn't supposed to. And that could have kicked off a chain of events that would have seen the entire world covered in mushroom clouds. All because of a fucking tree.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube! Everybody subscribe!